Hello friends, welcome to Samuch Speaks. And on this episode, we'll be looking at sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. The definitions. Because most times persons are overwhelmed by these terms and they tend not to understand what they mean. First of all, let's talk about sex, anatomical sex. What is sex? When you are given a form, you hear the word sex or you see the word sex. And on this episode, we are defining sex as the biological difference between male and female. To elaborate, sex, sometimes called biological sex, anatomical sex, or physical sex, is comprised of things like genitals, chromosomes, hormones, bodily hair, and many more. But one thing that sex is not is that sex is not gender. So the fact that a person is born male does not mean that the person would identify as masculine, or that a person was born biologically female should mean that the person should identify as feminine. But aside the biological difference between a male and a female, we have individuals that are called intersex, which is defined as a person living with difference in sex development. This is equally called, difference in sex characteristics. So that is that about anatomical sex. And we move to gender identity. So gender identity is your psychological sense of self. So your gender identity tends to look at who you are in your head, how you know yourself to be, based on how you align or don't align with what you understand to be option of gender. Because we know that gender is the social or cultural construct of femininity or masculinity. Therefore, gender identity is how you as an individual see yourself, your psychological sense of self, and how this your psychological sense of self align or do not align with the social construct or the cultural construct of gender within a given society. So, a person can be born female, but decides that they don't want to be feminine. They would rather act masculine based on social construct of gender. They prefer to wear jeans, baggy jeans, t-shirt. They prefer, not to catwalk, but to, walk, bounce like a guy. They prefer to do sports like football, and, prefer to roll with their male counterparts and all that. Against someone who, may be born, masculine, but will not align with any of the masculine, concept of gender. They would rather want to plait their hair. They would rather want to wear makeup. They would rather want to catwalk, So that is gender identity, your psychological sense of self, how you view yourself, how you align with yourself, from your head. And then we have gender expression, the ways you present gender through your action, your clothing, your demeanor, and more. Your outward facing self and how that is interpreted by others based on your gender norm. Just as your gender identity, the way you identify tends to influence the way you express gender. So the way you identify in your gender will influence the way you express your gender. That's as simple as that. So your outward expression, your demeanor, your clothing, your actions, that is what is called gender expression. So when you see a young man that is gesticulating, that is effeminate, that dances, and say, this one is dancing like a woman, the person is just expressing gender in the way it aligns with their psychological sense of self. And then we have the one that is called attraction, which is the sexual orientation. Like says, attraction isn't really a component of gender. However, we often conflate sexual orientation with gender or categorize the attraction we experience in a gendered way. So what do we mean by this? Sexual orientation is not gender, but sometimes we categorize the way we, attract to someone or attract to people in a gendered way, because sexual orientation is the emotional, sexual, or romantic attraction towards persons of opposite sex, same sex, or same and opposite sex for persons who are bisexual. And we have three basic sexual orientation or three basic attraction that people have within the concept of sexual orientation, which is homosexuality, heterosexuality, and bisexuality. And I tell you that within these three sexual orientation, none is more good than the other and none is more bad than the other. They are all sexual orientation in their own nature, and they are all experienced normally by human beings in nature. So they are all natural to human beings. Right? So anybody is free to be attracted to anybody. That is what we are saying. And so we have what we call, in understanding sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, we will have what we call gender-bread person, which is on the screen right now, gender-bread person. And in this gender-bread person, it explains categorically, who we are as human beings in our sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, where you can see that, your gender identity, the way you identify as, in gender, your psychological sense of self is in your head. Your sexual orientation, the attraction you have for people, is in your heart. So sexual orientation is born out of love, is born out of emotion, out of attraction. And then your sex, the biological difference between male and female and intersex, is now embodied in your genitalia, your chromosome and your chromosomes. And then outward expression exhibits your gender expression. So the way I'm expressing right now shows my gender expression. And so these are all categorized in this gender bread. And so if you understand this gender bread as a human being, you have already understood what your sexual orientation, your gender identity, and your gender expression is all about. And that is all on Samuch Speaks today. Thank you, and join me on the next episode. Bye.